Good afternoon. My name is John McCarthy, State's Attorney for Montgomery County, Maryland. On March the 25th, 1975, Catherine Lyon, age 10, and Sheila Lyon, age 12, walked from their homes only a few blocks away from where we now stand. At the time, there was a strip shopping center that existed at that location, and the two girls went to the mall to see Easter decorations and to eat lunch. The girls were both seen by multiple people while at the shopping center, including one of their brothers. Neither Catherine nor Sheila ever returned home. Catherine and Sheila were reported missing to the Montgomery County Police Department that evening by their parents. The investigation into their disappearance is currently into its 41st year. This case has never left the collective consciousness of this police department nor our community. We owe a special debt of gratitude to the Chief of Police, Tom Manger, and the men and women of Montgomery County Police Force for their leadership in this investigation. This investigation continues today, and it will go beyond the events that we are about to outline. This investigation has gone beyond the boundaries of Montgomery County, and it possesses the challenges of a 40-year-old case. I wish to acknowledge John and Mary Lyon, who join us here today, along with 3 generations of the Lyon family. We have met frequently with the Lyon family and all of the members of their family, and they are fully aware of the content of today's announcement. This case was not confined to a single jurisdiction. Collaboration and professionalism from multiple prosecutors' offices and law enforcement agencies at the federal, state, and local level was essential, given, and ongoing. I want to express a special note of thanks to Steve Vogt, Special Agent in charge of the FBI Field Office in Baltimore. I also want to acknowledge the assistance over this past year, in particular from Prince George's County State's Attorney Angela Also Brooks. Today's announcement is not the end of the investigative effort, but a transition to announcing an initial indictment. Joining me today for today's announcement are Chief of Police Thomas Manger from Montgomery County Police Department, Mike Brown, who is the Sheriff for Bedford County, Virginia, and Randy Krantz, the Commonwealth Attorney for Bedford County, Virginia. Those 3 gentlemen will each speak today. Following their comments, we will briefly entertain questions from the press. However, I would say to you that because this continues to be an active investigation, and because there are ethical constraints that are placed on any prosecutor who is handling a case set for trial, there may be limitations to the questions that we are able to answer for you. With that having been said, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Chief of Police for Montgomery County, J. Thomas Manger.
Thank you, John. The abduction of Sheila and Catherine Lyon over 40 years ago has haunted this community and this police department. The men and women of the Montgomery County Police Department have never given up on finding these girls. This case has been looked at many times through the years as we worked to give answers to the Lyon family and bring justice to this case. With today's announcement, we're finally able to start answering the questions of what happened in April of 1975. We would not be here today if not for the dedicated work of the law enforcement community. Many local, state, and federal agencies have assisted the Montgomery County Police Department over this last 40 years. We want to thank the many agencies that have helped since we focused on Lloyd Welch 2 years ago. Those agencies include the Bedford County Sheriff's Office, the Virginia State Police, the Dover, Delaware Police, the Delaware Department of Corrections, the FBI, the ATF, the U.S. Coast Guard, Prince George's County Police, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Virginia Commonwealth's Attorney, the Bedford Commonwealth's Attorney, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office. Now, today's announcement is not about the police. It's about the victim's family, and it's about justice. But I think that it's important to recognize the men and women of the Montgomery County Police Department who assisted with this ongoing investigation, and specifically our cold case section in our Major Crimes Division. Officers and civilians from every bureau of the department have contributed to this investigation. Most of the Investigative Services Bureau has assisted, especially the Special Investigations Division, the Fugitive Section, and the Major Crimes Division. And I want to recognize the extraordinary efforts of our cold case section. Over the years, many detectives, some who have long since been retired, have worked on this case. But in fact, it was a younger detective who finally saw the missing piece of the puzzle 2 years ago. Since then, this team has led an investigation with the mission of finally finding out what happened to Sheila and Catherine Lyon. This team has spent over this past 2 years, has spent 16,000 hours working on this case. They've served over 50 search warrants related to this case. Dozens of subpoenas have been issued, reams of documents analyzed, and numerous items of evidence seized. And over 100 interviews and interrogations have been conducted. The 3 primary detectives and their sergeant have traveled to half a dozen states to further this investigation and made countless trips to Bedford, Virginia in search of the facts of this case. These men and women have sacrificed much during this investigation so that we can provide some amount of closure to the Lyon family. Let me be clear that these efforts are not finished. The investigation is ongoing. This team continues with a purpose. We're focused on uncovering every fact of this case. And the Montgomery County Police and all of our partners will work to hold every individual responsible who was involved with the abduction and murder of the Lyon Sisters, as well as the ongoing conspiracy to conceal these crimes.
Thank you, Chief Major. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Sheriff for Bedford County, Virginia, Mike Brown.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Brown. I'm the Sheriff of Bedford County, Virginia. 39.5 years after their disappearance, the law enforcement community of Bedford County was introduced to Sheila and Catherine Lyon and became aware of the decades of dedicated commitment by Montgomery County, Maryland investigators and prosecutors to bring these killers to justice. The Montgomery County Police Department's Major Crime Unit detectives search led them to Bedford County, Virginia on Friday afternoon, September the 12th, 2014. These intrepid investigators arrived at Bedford County Sheriff's Office and informed my investigators of their ongoing investigation into Sheila and Catherine Lyon's disappearance from Montgomery County, Maryland on March 25th, 1975. At 5 p.m. on September the 12th, I, along with the Bedford County Commonwealth Attorney Randy Krantz and Virginia State Police Captain Tim Lyon and each of their respective investigators, met with the Montgomery County Police Department detectives at the Bedford County Sheriff's Office. And after being briefed and without hesitation, reservation, or qualification, became a full participating partner in this investigation in the ongoing efforts to identify and apprehend those responsible for the abduction and murder of 2 innocent children whose disappearance has so profoundly affected their family, friends, and the entire community and beyond. Within a few hours, the Bedford County Sheriff's investigators, Virginia State Police Special Agents, and the Bedford County Commonwealth Attorney's Office began the process of organizing a multi-agency response in Virginia to this case. By the weekend, Bedford County long-standing approach to coordination, cooperation, and communication to resolve major violent crimes was launched with our Maryland partners. Thousands of man and woman hours, approximately 15 to 2,000 hours in Bedford County alone, came to bear in this case. Old-fashioned police work and advanced criminal investigative analysis has been utilized to learn the fate of Sheila and Catherine and identify the identity and culpability of these responsible for the abduction and deaths. The FBI's Evidence Response Team, Virginia State Police, Montgomery County Police, Bedford County Sheriff's Officers spent many painstaking hours in very rough terrain, in very heavy, cold, snowy weather up on the mountains looking for forensic evidence in this particular case. During these investigative efforts and searches, neither a whimper, whine, or woe is me was heard from any of the investigators. Their bulldog tenacity in achieving justice for the Lyons family and their profound loss never wavered, and it never will. In October 2014, Commonwealth Attorney Randy Krantz began presenting evidence relating to this case to a Bedford County multi-jurisdictional grand jury. The grand jury has remained in session continuously since it was impaneled and remains so today. As a result of the evidence presented before the grand jury, indictments were handed down in this case on Friday, July the 10th, 2015 in Bedford County, Virginia. The indictments were sealed at that time, but are now being unsealed today. I am honored to report that my Commonwealth Attorney, Randy Krantz, obtained indictments charging Lloyd Lee Michael Welch, Jr. with first-degree felony murder for his involvement in the deaths of Sheila and Catherine Lyon based upon the totality of the evidence revealed by the investigative effort of law enforcement and sworn witness testimony. As previously mentioned, the investigator remains very active, and our investigative actions will continue, with gusto, I might add. And lastly, I would like to say, I have worked in this area in the early 70s. I was a D.C. cop. After that, I was a ATF agent. And Montgomery County Police Department, it was a bright light in the law enforcement arena in this area. I can assure the residents of Montgomery County that that light has not been dimmed since their investigation with us in Bedford County. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce the Commonwealth Attorney for Bedford County, Virginia, Randy Krantz.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been said sometimes at momentous occasions or at milestones that it's not the end of the process, it's not even the beginning of the end of the process, but it may be the end of the beginning. If we in Bedford County have obtained indictments as we have done, and we seem at this point to have a view in going forward in the trial of Lloyd Welch, if we see a little farther down the road at this precise moment, it is only because we stand on the shoulders of the giants in law enforcement and prosecution here in Montgomery County that got us to this point and continue to work with us. The indictments that were unsealed were two, charging Lloyd Welch, Jr. with first-degree felony murder during an abduction with the intent to defile Sheila and Catherine Lyon. The next step in the process will be beginning the trial process, and it is our duty and it is our intent to exercise every process that is due to ensure that Mr. Welch receives a fair trial in Bedford County. I would also say, as we transition and join with Operation Worthy Cause that continues, the trial, the continuing investigation begins the process of Operation Determined Justice. It is our intent and it is our duty to try to bring justice not only to this community, but also, and most importantly, to the Lyons family. We ask your patience and forbearance as we begin this process. It will be lengthy. It will be meticulous. There will be days when it seems as if nothing's happening, and there will be other days when profound things happen. But again, we ask for your patience and your dignity in the way you respond to and interact with the Lyons family, to respect their privacy, to respect their grief, but most of all, to respect the integrity of the trial process as we move forward. Thank you.
We will at this time entertain a couple of questions with the understanding that for a variety of reasons I mentioned earlier, we may not be able to answer them.
John, has any forensic evidence proving that the girls were in Bedford County been found?
No comment.
John, can I say, under ethical constraints, you are not permitted as a prosecutor to specifically comment upon evidence, like physical evidence. You're just not permitted to answer. I understand the question. It's a fine question. It's just not one we're permitted ethically to answer.
John, are there more suspects? It seemed like, I may have misheard, but it sounded like when other people were talking, you said murderers or the person's responsible. Do you believe Lloyd Welch acted alone, or do you believe there were other people involved in it?
I'll leave you with the words, the investigation continues. We've indicted one individual and the investigation continues. I think there's a logical conclusion you can reach.
Why is the indictment in Bedford County instead of in Montgomery County? Do you have evidence that the crime occurred in Bedford County as opposed to the murder?
Yes.
Can you say any more?
I cannot.
Mr. Krantz, why is DNA testing a capital murder charge in Virginia?
We have to apply the charge that was in place in 1975. In 1975, first-degree felony murder carried the penalty of 20 years to life or death.
Is DNA testing being done?
No comment.
We're looking at 2 counts, obviously, in this case.
Yes, there are 2 counts, one for each victim.
And is there any indication that there was obstruction by family members?
Non-cooperation has prolonged this investigation and made it difficult. Whether or not it amounts to formal obstruction of justice charges is to be determined. It is being evaluated. I will say one family member, Patricia Welch, was indicted and is to stand trial for perjury before the multi-jurisdictional grand jury.
Mr. Krantz, before you go, your last answer suggested that the death penalty is open to you. So can you describe your thinking at this point on that?
I cannot comment on that.
Can you tell us the abduction with intent to defile, was that a separate charge or is that under the murder charge?
It is under the murder charge. What first-degree felony murder is the allegation that during the commission of the abduction of Sheila and Catherine Lyon, with the intent to defile. Intent to defile means to sexually abuse, exploit, molest. During that abduction, and as a natural consequence of that abduction, Lloyd Welch also committed the first-degree murder of those girls. So the words and the allegation in the charge are that this was a murder during an abduction. 2 counts, 1 for each victim.
Can you say if anything on Taylor's Mountain was recovered that is connected to this case?
Cannot comment on evidence.
Will the same grand jury that hands down the indictments Friday continue to look at the case?
Yes, it will.
What additional information do you expect to release tomorrow?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What additional information do you expect to release tomorrow?
We'll do that tomorrow.
Well, why is that? Can you explain that to us? Why the same cast of people will gather 4 hours from here to release more information? Why don't we just get this information?
Because we have local media in Bedford that couldn't make it up here today.
That's the only reason you're quoting as a courtesy to local media in Central Virginia?
We're not withholding any information. We're making additional information available tomorrow.
So that's withholding information today?
No further comment.
Could you describe it all? I know that the parents have been horrified by this whole thing, but can you describe it all? Were they relieved at this announcement when you told them about it? What was the reaction?
I don't know that any parent or any family member can ever be relieved to find out that their children have been murdered. I think it is appreciated of all the law enforcement and prosecutorial efforts that are being made in this case, and I believe that they understand the lengthy process that is still involved and have expressed their gratitude for that.
What's it going to take to get Mr. Welch out of Delaware prison and into Virginia?
We will have to go through what is sometimes referred to as an extradition process, but because he is an inmate, it's a little additional process, but we will begin that immediately of filing our detainers with the Delaware State Prison to, as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, make Mr. Welch a Bedford, Virginia inmate.
Has he been informed of these new charges?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Can't comment.
If a murder happened in Virginia, these children were abducted here in Montgomery County, you're not ready to charge that aspect of this crime?
We have actively had a conversation about precisely that issue. And as I mentioned in my preliminary comments, I think there are multiple jurisdictions that have some claim to this matter. When you sit down with valued colleagues like Mr. Krantz, we made a determination about what was best for the case. So I will tell you, after careful discussion with Mr. Feeney, Mr. Krantz, his deputies, we've made a decision that this was the best way to start this matter. That does not mean, now I'm not going to, that other jurisdictions could not bring charges. We think this is the best thing for the case, and people who are interested in bringing justice to the Lyons family, we've talked to John and Mary. They know exactly why we're doing it this way. I think they understand it, and they are sympathetic to our rationales. And I think that, again, this is the best thing, we think, in our judgment for this case.
Do you believe that Lloyd Welch abducted the Lyon Sisters from Wheaton Plaza?
Well, again, that's my personal opinion. Let me say to you, I think the indictment itself, by implication, indicates, yes, we thought he was involved in the abduction. So I think the indictment that Mr. Krantz spoke to does, in fact, answer that question. Yes, we think Mr. Lyon, and that's by virtue of what is in the indictment itself.
John, this case has covered over the community in your entire legal career, I think.
Yeah.
Did you think you were going to get to this day, and what's your heart on this right now that this has arrived?
I was teaching high school 2 blocks from here in 1975 on the day these girls were abducted. I was teaching 7th period history class. I knew about this case almost instantly because it was in the community where I worked then. It has remained with us forever. I mean, I think Tom talked to this. This has never left the consciousness of this community, never has been ignored by the police department through all the years I've been there in the State's Attorney's Office, which is close to 35 years. This issue has been discussed over and over again. If this helps the Lyon family, this is a happy day for me. These are wonderful, wonderful people who have suffered an immeasurable loss. We have talked to them early on in this investigation, and again, Randy talked to the fact that they beg you for their privacy, which was ripped from them for reasons of not their own choosing 40 years ago when their daughters were taken and later murdered. This was not of their choosing. They did not pick to be victims, and they don't pick to be the center, but they would like to have closure. They would like to have closure and know what happened to their daughters and have the people responsible for what happened to them held accountable. That may be the single most important thing that's happening here today for me.
Do you think that Lloyd Welch might be involved in the disappearance of other children somewhere else in the country?
Well, I'm not going to speculate that, other than the fact that we know that Mr. Welch is incarcerated on sexual offenses against children, where he's serving time now. So I'm not going to speculate that. I don't know. It's fair to anybody, but we know what he's in jail for.
I mean, that's been part of our investigation all along, is to try and track Welch's activities from the time that this abduction occurred through to when he was incarcerated. So yeah, we're our investigators. That's part of what they've been doing all over the country.
You mentioned a conspiracy to conceal this crime. Can you elaborate on that at all, or describe how many people were involved in covering this up?
Well, that remains part of the ongoing investigation. That we believe that there are people that have information, that knew about what was occurring, and that would be that was criminal behavior on their part, not coming forward and not assisting with this investigation. And so that's now continues to be a part of our investigation.
Relative report.
Police officer, and Sheriff Brown, you as well. You've been a police officer in this area a long time. What was the impact on the D.C. area, the disappearance of the
Well, if you ask anybody that lived in Montgomery County, they can tell you a personal story about how they or their family was impacted. I was in college at the time and lived in Silver Spring, and I will tell you that I remember my parents talking about it. I remember my mother specifically, who came up and shopped at this shopping center all the time, talking about how this might change where she goes to do business. And these were conversations that were going on in the majority of households in Montgomery County. When 40 years later, you could mention a crime that occurred 40 years ago. Very few individuals would know what you were talking about. You mentioned the Lyon Sisters case. People nod their head and say, yes, we remember. So this was something that had an enormous impact on this community and the feeling of safety for your children in this community. And I think that's one of the reasons that the police department just never allowed this case to get to just be filed away in a box somewhere. We paid attention to this for over the course of 40 years, and it was that work that Detective Davis did 2 years ago, where he connected some dots that hadn't previously been connected, that really started us on the path that we find ourselves today.
There were media reports that Lloyd Welch implicated a male relative, Richard Welch. Is that part of this investigation?
All of that is part of the investigation, absolutely. Should
we expect an indictment?
That's why the investigation is ongoing. I mean, we've got to determine when we get enough information that a grand jury would indict. That's still an ongoing process for us.
Do you have copies of the indictment, or is it posted online somewhere? Should be online.
I'm told it's online.
At this point, do you foresee any possible searches for physical evidence in the future?
We have done those in the past. They continue today. They will continue in the future. I mean, one of the, if there's physical evidence that is possible to find, we want to find it. That is an ongoing process. Continues to be part of our investigation. I mean, I mentioned that we have served dozens of search warrants, and there are more planned in the future.
Do you continue to search for the remains? I'm sure the family would like to have them buried.
That is absolutely a part of what we're trying to do.
And those searches, will they be conducted in Montgomery County or Bedford?
You know, most of the search warrants at this point are in Bedford. But I will tell you, there are some in other jurisdictions as well.
Including Montgomery County?
No, I'm not aware of any that are ongoing in Montgomery County at this point.
Can anybody speak to how difficult it is to prosecute a case without a body?
I have one of those rare cases I tried in the late 80s, State versus Gregory 2, which was the first case where we had the advantage of DNA evidence. It is difficult. It is difficult. Typically, in a homicide, you have an autopsy and you have a body, and you can prove what the cause and mechanism of death is. In a no-body murder case, you have to prove that they are in fact dead, and you have to prove the agent by which they died. It is an extremely difficult case. But I will tell you, I think the decision which was taken by Mr. Krantz was not taken lightly. I think he understands. We have both researched extensively the trial of no-body cases. And I will tell you, if there is a method or a manner by which anyone has attempted to prove a no-body murder anywhere in the United States, between Mr. Krantz and myself, we have reviewed and are familiar with those particular methods. And obviously, knowing the girls, and we have access to the Lyons family, and so to a certain extent, we know what Catherine and Sheila were like, what fine young children they were. We know that the fact that they did not return home that day was because they were prevented from returning home. These were wonderful, wonderful, naive, beautiful children, and that helps. That will help us. Listen, thank you very much.